Today, we uncover the shocking truth about UK milk. Over 100 British dairy farmers were forced to dump thousands of litres of fresh milk down drains for 12 straight days because a processor's factory broke down and nobody cared enough to fix it fast. And just months before that, 700 cows collapsed and perished from contaminated feed on a single dairy farm. 700 animals gone because the industrial system that's supposed to protect them failed catastrophically. But here's what they don't tell you. The milk we grew up with, the milk that came in glass bottles with cream that pushed the foil cap off in winter, the milk our grandparents poured fresh from local dairies, has been quietly stripped away. Not all at once. One process at a time, one corporate takeover at a time, one backroom deal at a time. And now it's reached its breaking point. Somewhere along the line, milk stopped being milk and started becoming a processed industrial liquid. For logistics, not for nourishment. For profit margins, not for the people drinking it. Just a few decades ago, milk arrived at your doorstep in glass bottles, delivered fresh, with nothing between you and the product except the cow that made it and the farmer who cared for that cow. Who could have guessed where we'd end up now? Today, almost all of it arrives in plastic, because plastic fits the needs of industry far more than the needs of the consumer. Today, most milk travels through tankers that blend together thousands of farms into one anonymous white liquid. You can't know which farm it came from. You can't know how those cows lived. You can't know what they were fed or whether they ever saw a blade of grass. And the companies selling it to you would prefer you didn't ask. Because when you start asking questions, you realize the whole system has moved so far from nature that calling it milk feels almost generous. It's more accurate to call it what it really is. A shelf-stable beverage shaped by machinery, not by pasture, filtered, heated, homogenized and standardized until every trace of what made milk taste like milk has been processed into submission. And then there's what happened in late 2024. Britain's biggest dairy processor partnered with major supermarkets to trial a chemical feed additive called Bovaer on 30 farms. The goal was reducing cow burps to hit climate targets. The problem was, they didn't tell you. No labels, no warnings. No consumer choice. Just your Crevendale, your Tesco own brand, your Aldi milk, all quietly part of an experiment you never consented to. When people found out, the backlash was instant. TikTok videos of customers dumping bottles down drains, independent shops refusing to stock Arla products. The trial quietly ended in November 2025, but the message was clear. When corporate sustainability targets conflict with consumer consent, they'll choose the targets every time. The trial milk is gone from shelves. Now the experiment is over. But the companies that ran it without asking, still the same companies. Nature makes food simple. Greed makes it complicated. And what you're about to hear will make you rethink every brand in the dairy aisle. So we've gone through the major milk brands currently sold in UK supermarkets and will expose the 9 products you need to avoid. Then I'll tell you the 5 which are actually still worth buying. But before we get into it, I need you to do something. If you care about knowing what's really in your food, if you're tired of corporations treating you like a lab rat, hit that like button and especially that hype button right now. Because every time you hype this video, it reaches thousands more people who deserve to know the truth. YouTube's algorithm doesn't care about what's right. It cares about what's getting hyped. So when you click that button, you're not just supporting this channel. You're forcing these companies to notice. You're telling them that people are waking up and they can't hide behind marketing anymore. The more this spreads, the more pressure they feel to change. And if enough of us push back, they'll have no choice but to raise their standards. So hype it, share it, make some noise. Because silence is exactly what they're counting on. And let's get into it. Number 9. Aldi Everyday Essentials Milk. Aldi's Everyday Essentials is sold as the no-nonsense budget option. Simple label, low price, get in and get out. But the simplicity stops at the packaging. Behind the scenes, this milk moves through one of the most sprawling industrial supply chains in Europe. Much of Aldi's milk is sourced from large networks across the UK and EU, where milk from dozens, sometimes hundreds, of different farms gets pulled together long before it reaches the bottle. When milk is blended at this scale, any idea of traceability disappears completely. You don't know which farm it came from. You don't know how the cows lived or what they were fed. You just know it met the minimum legal standard to be called milk, and that's about it. The farming systems supplying this range tend to rely on intensive indoor operations. High-yield herds raised for volume, not quality. Cows kept inside year-round, standing on concrete, fed grain-heavy diets instead of grass. And when animals live this way, the milk inevitably reflects the system behind it. Grain-fed cows produce milk that's flatter, thinner, and lower in the natural richness that comes from pasture grazing. The beneficial fats, the omega-3s, the conjugated linoleic acid that you'd find in grass-fed milk, they're just not there in the same amounts. And because this milk comes from so many different sources, the processing has to compensate. Strong homogenization to break down fat globules, heat treatments to stabilize massive mixed batches, chemical-free, sure, but natural, not even close. The whole operation is built around cutting costs, not delivering quality. And the price reflects that, but so does the taste. Aldi Everyday Essentials isn't the worst milk on British shelves, but it's a clear product of scale, not of pasture. It's what happens when milk becomes a logistics problem instead of a food. Number 8. Arla Standard Fresh Milk. Arla is a massive dairy cooperative that dominates the UK milk supply. They're everywhere, supplying supermarkets, producing branded products, running one of the largest processing operations in Europe. And that scale is exactly the problem. Arla sources milk from thousands of farms across multiple countries: the UK, Denmark, Sweden, Germany. All of it gets pulled into the same tankers, blended together, and processed in enormous batches. Once that milk enters the system, any sense of individual farm standards disappears. You can't know if your bottle came from a well-managed UK farm or an intensive operation abroad. It all gets mixed together into one uniform product. The cows producing Arla milk are predominantly Holstein Friesians, bred specifically for maximum output rather than milk quality. These animals produce huge volumes, but the milk itself tends to have lower butterfat and protein content than traditional heritage breeds. And most of these cows spend significant time indoors on grain-based diets, which shifts the nutrient profile even further away from what grass-fed milk provides. The processing reflects the same industrial mindset. Milk is pasteurized at high temperatures, homogenized aggressively, and stored for days before it even reaches distribution. By the time you buy Arla milk, it could easily be 5 to 7 days old, and the flavor shows it. Bland, slightly sweet, lacking the richness you'd expect from quality milk. But what really defines Arla isn't just the processing. It's what happened in late 2024. That's when Arla partnered with Tesco, Morrisons, and Aldi to trial Bovaer, a chemical feed additive, on 30 of their farms. The substance was designed to reduce methane from cow burps to help hit sustainability targets. And they didn't tell consumers. No labels indicating which milk came from trial farms, no warnings, no choice. People only found out when the news leaked, and the backlash was immediate. Social media exploded. Customers filmed themselves throwing away Cravendale and Lurpak. Independent retailers refused to stock Arla products. The trial ended in November 2025, and the milk from those farms is long gone from shelves now. But the fact that it happened at all tells you everything about how these massive processors operate. Scale first, transparency second, consumer consent somewhere further down the list. The milk you buy from Arla today is almost certainly Bovaer-free. But the company that experimented on you without asking, still the same company. Number 7. Morrisons Savers Milk. Morrisons Savers is one of the clearest examples of what budget milk really means. It doesn't just mean a lower price, it means the lowest cost suppliers, the thinnest margins, and the least transparency about where your milk actually comes from. This range is sourced from the bottom end of the supply chain, where milk from multiple farms and sometimes multiple countries gets pulled together long before bottling. When milk is blended on this scale, every meaningful detail gets lost. You can't trace it back to a specific farm. You can't know what the cows were fed or whether they spent any time outdoors. Everything becomes a uniform white liquid shaped by logistics, not by farming. The farms supplying this range are typically intensive indoor operations, high-volume production, grain-based feeding, minimal pasture access. And because grain-fed cows produce milk that's naturally thinner and paler, the final product tastes exactly like what it is: cheap. The processing makes it worse. ultra-high heat treatments to extend shelf life, aggressive homogenization to make every bottle look identical despite coming from dozens of different sources. Long storage periods before the milk even reaches regional depots. By the time it hits Morrisons' shelves, it could be a week old, and the proteins show the stress. That's why Savor's milk often separates quickly when you add it to hot tea or coffee. The structure has been compromised by both the cow's diet and the heavy-handed processing designed to stabilize such low-quality raw material. Morrisons also made headlines for the wrong reasons with their fake farm name scandal. They marketed own-brand products under names like Hemsley's Farm, trying to give the impression of small-scale, traceable farming. But when customers investigated, they found those farms either didn't exist or had no connection to the actual milk supply. After 70% of consumers objected, Morrisons quietly dropped the names. But the damage was done. It showed how far supermarkets will go to manufacture a story that makes you feel good about buying cheap milk, even when the reality behind it is nothing like the image they're selling. Morrisons Savers may save you money at the till, but it doesn't save standards, and it definitely doesn't save the trust that real food is supposed to come with. Number 6. UHT milk. Any brand. UHT stands for ultra high temperature, and the name tells you exactly what's wrong with it. This isn't milk that's been gently pasteurized to remove harmful bacteria while keeping the good stuff intact. This is milk that's been blasted to 280 degrees Fahrenheit, held there for a few seconds, then sealed into cartons that can sit in your cupboard for months. The goal is shelf stability. The cost is everything that made milk nutritious and alive. When you heat milk to that temperature, the proteins denature. The structure flattens. Vitamins degrade. Up to 20% of B vitamins like B12, folate, and thiamine are lost. The delicate enzymes that help your body digest and absorb nutrients simply cease to function. What you're left with is a sterile white liquid that technically still qualifies as milk, but only in the same way a knockoff looks like the real thing. The taste gives it away immediately. UHT milk has a slightly cooked, almost metallic sweetness that never quite goes away. It's the flavor of proteins that have been stressed beyond recognition. And because the milk is biologically dead, it behaves differently. You can't culture yogurt from it, you can't make proper cheese. Beneficial bacteria won't grow in it because there's nothing left for them to feed on. If living organisms won't touch it, that should tell you something about whether your body wants to either. UHT milk exists because it solves a logistics problem. It can survive long transport routes, sit in warehouses for weeks, and stay on shelves without refrigeration. It's convenient for supply chains. But convenience for industry doesn't mean quality for consumers. And when you compare UHT to fresh milk from well-managed farms, the difference isn't subtle. One is a living food that spoils naturally because it contains beneficial organisms. The other is a shelf-stable beverage that doesn't spoil because there's nothing alive left to spoil. Real milk doesn't last 3 months in a cupboard, and if yours does, you might want to ask why. Number 5. Asda own brand fresh milk. Asda own brand milk follows the same pattern as most budget supermarket ranges. Low shelf price, high cost in the farming system behind it. This milk is sourced from multiple suppliers across the UK and Europe, with contracts that shift based purely on price. One week, the milk might come from a British farm. The next week, it's from a completely different supplier in another country. When sourcing jumps around like that, traceability disappears entirely. You have no way of knowing how the cows were treated, what they were fed, or what welfare standards were followed, because everything gets mixed together long before the milk reaches the bottle. The farms supplying Asda's budget ranges tend to operate intensive indoor systems, cows kept inside, fed grain-based diets, pushed to produce high volumes. And milk from animals living this way carries a noticeably thinner texture and flatter taste. The nutrient profile never matches the richness you'd get from cows grazing outdoors on pasture. Because large mixed batches like these come from so many different farms, the processing has to be aggressive to make it all look uniform. Strong homogenization, high heat treatments, chemical stabilizers to ensure consistency. And even then, the quality varies. Some batches taste acceptable. Others have an off flavor, slightly sour or chemically tainted, because the raw milk quality wasn't consistent to begin with. Asda was also part of the Arla Bovaer trial in late 2024. They partnered with Arla to sell milk from the 30 trial farms where Bovaer was being tested without consumer notification. That trial ended in November 2025, so the milk on shelves now is clean. But it's another example of how little transparency these large supermarket chains offer when corporate partners come calling with experimental programs. Smart price may be one of the cheapest options in the dairy aisle, but cheaper milk always comes with a story. And once you understand the system behind it, the low price begins to make a lot more sense than the milk itself. Number 4. Cravendale filtered milk. Cravendale markets itself as purer, fresher, better. The packaging looks premium, the price is nearly double what you'd pay for standard milk. And the whole pitch is built around their ceramic filtration process, which supposedly removes impurities and makes the milk last longer. But peel back the marketing, and what you're really looking at is industrial overprocessing dressed up as quality. The filtration system runs milk through microscopic ceramic pores to remove bacteria. And it does remove bacteria, all of them. The harmful ones, sure, but also the beneficial bacteria that naturally occur in fresh milk and help with digestion. The result is milk that can sit unopened in your fridge for 3 weeks without spoiling. And that's not because it's fresher, it's because it's been stripped of everything that makes milk a living food. Real fresh milk doesn't last 3 weeks. It's meant to be consumed within days of production, because it contains natural organisms that cause it to sour when those organisms run their course. Cravendale doesn't sour the same way because there's nothing left alive to cause the process. It's essentially sterile. The taste reflects that. Cravendale has an artificial sweetness that people often mistake for creaminess, but it's not the richness of grass-fed milk. It's the result of the filtration process concentrating certain sugars while removing other compounds. The milk tastes processed because it is processed heavily. And despite the premium price, the source milk behind Cravendale isn't organic. It's not from pasture-fed cows. It comes from the same intensive farming systems that supply budget milk. The only difference is the extra processing steps that Arla adds before bottling it. And those steps don't make the milk better, they make it last longer on shelves, which benefits Arla's logistics and profit margins, but does absolutely nothing for the person drinking it. Cravendale is also an Arla product, which means it was part of the same corporate structure that ran those Bovaer trials without telling consumers. The trial milk is gone now, but the company's approach to transparency hasn't changed. You're paying premium prices for overprocessed milk from an industrial system that prioritizes shelf life over quality and corporate targets over consumer trust. That's not purity, that's just expensive engineering. Number 3. Sainsbury's own brand fresh milk. Sainsbury's own brand milk is primarily supplied by Müller. They switched away from Arla years ago and now source the bulk of their fresh milk from Müller's network of farms across the UK. And while that means Sainsbury's milk wasn't part of the Arla Bovaer trials, it doesn't mean the quality is any better. Because Müller operates the same kind of large-scale industrial system that prioritizes volume and consistency over anything resembling traditional dairy farming, Müller sources from hundreds of farms blending milk together in massive batches to create standardized products that look identical no matter which farm the milk originally came from. High-quality milk from well-managed operations gets diluted by lower-quality milk from intensive farms, and the final product reflects that averaging out. The processing is aggressive. High-temperature pasteurization designed to extend shelf life through long supply chains. Homogenization that permanently alters the fat structure so cream never rises to the top. And because Sainsbury's Basics range sits at the budget end, it's often made from milk that didn't quite meet the standards for their mid-tier products. The taste is flat, almost chalky. There's no richness, no natural sweetness, no cream flavor. It tastes like white water with a vague dairy presence, and that's because the farming system behind it isn't built to deliver flavor, it's built to deliver volume at the lowest possible cost. When you add Sainsbury's Basics milk to hot tea or coffee, it often separates more quickly than higher quality milk. That separation isn't random. It's a sign that the proteins have been stressed by both the cow's grain-heavy diet and the aggressive processing used to make the milk stable enough to survive the industrial supply chain. Sainsbury's isn't transparent about which specific farms supply their milk, and they don't need to be. UK labelling laws only require them to state country of origin, not individual farm traceability. So you're left with a product that might be British, but you'll never know if it came from a small family farm trying to do things right, or a massive indoor operation where animal welfare is purely a legal checkbox. Sainsbury's Basics milk is cheap, but it's cheap because corners were cut long before the milk reached the supermarket, and those corners show up in every cup of tea. Number 2. Tesco own brand fresh milk. Tesco is Britain's biggest supermarket, and their own brand milk reflects exactly what happens when scale becomes the priority. Tesco sources from multiple processors, primarily Arla and Müller, which means their milk comes from the same industrial supply chains we've already discussed. Massive farms, indoor operations, grain-fed cows, aggressive processing, all of it blended together into white liquid that meets minimum legal standards but offers zero traceability and minimal quality. What makes Tesco particularly frustrating is the illusion of choice. They offer everyday value, standard and finest ranges, and the packaging makes it look like you're getting different levels of quality. But the reality is that much of this milk comes from the same processors, often the same tankers, with only minor differences in fat content or packaging quality to justify the price gaps. A former Tesco employee confirmed that finest milk and standard milk would sometimes arrive in the same delivery, sourced from identical supply chains, with the only difference being the label and the price. You're not paying for better farming practices or higher welfare standards when you buy Tesco Finest. You're paying for marketing. Tesco was also directly involved in the Arla Bovaer trials. They partnered with Arla to trial the feed additive on farms supplying their stores, and they did it without informing customers which products contained milk from those trial farms. The trial ended in November 2025, so current Tesco milk is Bovaer-free. But the fact that Tesco participated at all shows how willing they are to let their suppliers experiment on consumers without transparency. And what's particularly galling is that Tesco positions itself as a trusted household name. Generations of British families have shopped there. But trust requires honesty, and when a company allows secret trials in their supply chain, then quietly ends them only after public backlash, that's not trust. That's damage control. Tesco's milk today might be technically safe and legal, but it's still a product of the same industrial system that treats milk as a commodity, not as food. And it still comes from a retailer that chose corporate partnership over consumer consent. Number 1. Müller Fresh Milk. Müller is one of the most recognizable names in British dairy. The branding looks reassuring, the bottles look premium, and the name carries weight. But once you look behind the label, you find a system that's more industrial than most shoppers realize. Müller sources milk from a sprawling network of farms across the UK, with thousands of suppliers contributing to the same pooled supply. When milk from that many farms gets blended together, traceability disappears entirely. You don't know how those cows lived, what they were fed, or what standards were applied on individual farms, because everything ends up in the same tanker anyway. And earlier this year, in April 2025, that system collapsed in spectacular fashion. Müller's processing facility broke down, and for 12 straight days, over 100 British dairy farmers were forced to dump thousands of litres of fresh milk straight down drains. 12 days of watching perfectly good milk go to waste because Müller couldn't fix their factory fast enough and didn't have backup plans in place to process the milk elsewhere. The farmers weren't compensated properly, the milk was simply lost. And it exposed just how fragile and centralized the UK dairy system has become when one processor's equipment failure can cascade into that kind of waste. But the problems with Müller go deeper than a single factory breakdown. This is the same company that pays farmers 33 to 35 pence per litre when the actual cost of producing that milk is closer to 37 to 40 pence. Farmers are literally losing money on every litre they sell to Müller, and the only reason they keep doing it is because Müller controls such a large share of the market that they have no better options. It's not a partnership, it's exploitation dressed up in contracts. And then there's the environmental record. Müller owns Dairy Crest, which was fined £1.52 million by the Environment Agency for pollution violations. It was the largest fine ever issued in southwest England at the time. The company had repeatedly allowed waste to leak into local waterways, ignoring warnings and failing to meet even basic compliance standards. That fine tells you exactly how Müller operates: profits first, compliance when forced. And farmers and the environment can deal with whatever's left over. Müller looks like a premium choice because of the branding. But peel back that branding, and it's just another massive player in an industrial system that prioritizes volume over quality, supply chain efficiency over farm welfare, and shareholder returns over anything resembling integrity. The milk might be legal, it might be safe, but it's coming from a company that proved this year it can't even manage its own factories without forcing farmers to dump their livelihoods down drains. That's not dairy excellence. That's industrial failure with good marketing. Now let's talk about the milk that's actually worth your time, the milk that still respects the basics: grass, sunlight, animals living the way they were meant to live. Because despite everything we've just covered, real milk still exists in Britain. You just have to know where to look. And the good news is that some of it is sitting on supermarket shelves right now, not hidden away in specialty stores or farmers markets, though those are excellent options too. What separates the good milk from the industrial sludge isn't complicated. It comes down to a few simple things: organic certification, which guarantees no synthetic pesticides, no routine antibiotics, and minimum grazing time outdoors; unhomogenized processing, which means the milk hasn't been beaten into submission by machinery and the cream still rises to the top naturally; and transparency, which means the company behind the label is willing to tell you exactly where the milk comes from and how the cows are treated. When you find milk that ticks those boxes, you can taste the difference immediately. It's richer, creamier. It has a natural sweetness that doesn't come from processing, it comes from cows eating what they were born to eat. And it behaves differently too. It doesn't separate as quickly in hot drinks, it cultures properly for yogurt and cheese. It feels like actual food instead of a manufactured beverage. So here are the 5 options you should be looking for. First, Waitrose Dutchie Organic Whole Milk, unhomogenized. This is the gold standard of supermarket milk. Strict organic certification from the Soil Association, which means the cows graze on pasture for at least 200 days a year, eat organic grass, and aren't routinely dosed with antibiotics. The milk is unhomogenized, so the cream rises to the top, just like it did when your grandparents got milk delivered in glass bottles. You shake it yourself before pouring, and that's how you know it hasn't been industrially processed into uniformity. Waitrose sources this milk from just 9 dedicated farms in the West Country, so you're getting genuine traceability and consistency. It costs more than budget milk, obviously, but you're not paying for marketing or logistics engineering. You're paying for farming done right. And when you taste it, the difference is undeniable. This is what milk is supposed to taste like: rich, creamy, with a natural sweetness that only comes from cows living outdoors on grass. If you shop at Waitrose or order from Ocado, this should be your default choice. Second, Graham's Jersey Gold Top Unhomogenized Whole Milk. Graham's is Scotland's largest independent dairy, and they've been family-owned since 1939. That independence matters because they're not beholden to corporate shareholders or multinational processors. They work directly with 100 specially selected Scottish farms, pay their farmers fairly, and maintain genuine traceability throughout the supply chain. The Jersey Gold Top range is their premium line, made from milk from Jersey cows, which are a heritage breed that naturally produces richer milk with higher butterfat and more protein than the industrial Holstein Friesians that dominate most dairy herds. Jersey cows also tend to produce more A2 protein, which many people find easier to digest than the A1 protein common in standard supermarket milk. The milk is unhomogenized, so you get that natural cream layer on top. And Graham's has publicly confirmed multiple times that none of their farming partners used Bovaer or any similar feed additives. They stayed completely clear of those trials, which tells you something about their priorities. You can find Graham's in Morrisons, some Sainsbury stores, and throughout Scotland. It's not the cheapest option, but it's genuinely good milk from a genuinely independent company that's doing things the right way. Third, Organic Herd Cooperative Milk. This is a farmer-owned cooperative of 300 organic farms across the UK, and the whole structure is built around fair pay and high standards. The farmers own the cooperative, which means they're not selling to a processor that squeezes their margins. They're working together to get their milk to market while maintaining control over quality and welfare standards. The cooperative pays farmers 49 to 56 pence per litre, compared to the 33 to 35 pence that companies like Müller pay. That difference isn't charity. It's what it actually costs to produce high-quality organic milk when you're not cutting corners. All of the milk is certified organic, which guarantees pasture grazing, no synthetic pesticides, and no routine antibiotics. And because the farmers have ownership, they have a direct incentive to maintain high standards because their reputation and income depend on it. You can find organic herd milk in various retailers and farm shops. It's not as widely distributed as Waitrose Dutchie or Graham's, but if you see it, grab it. This is what dairy farming looks like when farmers are in charge instead of corporate processors. Fourth, local dairy farm direct and farm shops. This is the ultimate option if you have access to it. Buying directly from a farm or through a farm shop gives you complete traceability. You know exactly where the milk came from. You can visit the farm if you want. You can ask questions about how the cows are treated and what they're fed. Many small dairies offer unhomogenized milk, and some even sell raw milk directly from the farm gate, which is legal in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, though not in Scotland. Raw milk is unpasteurized, which means it contains all the natural enzymes and beneficial bacteria that processing destroys. It's not for everyone, and it does require more careful handling, but for people who want milk as close to its natural state as possible, it's an option worth exploring. Even if you're not interested in raw milk, many small farms sell pasteurized, unhomogenized milk that's far superior to anything you'll find in supermarkets. To find farms near you, search online for farm shops or raw milk producers in your area. Many have websites or social media where they list their products and opening hours. And if you're buying direct from the farm, you're supporting local agriculture in the most direct way possible. Your money goes straight to the people doing the work, not to corporate middlemen. Fifth, milk and more doorstep delivery, with caveats. Milk and More brings back the nostalgia of doorstep delivery in glass bottles, which is genuinely appealing if you remember what milk used to be like. And glass bottles are better for the environment than plastic, assuming they're actually reused properly. But here's the caveat. Milk and More sources from multiple suppliers, and not all of them are created equal. Some of their milk comes from the same industrial processes we've been criticizing. So if you're going to use Milk and More, you need to be selective about which products you choose. Look for their organic options, or check which specific dairy supplies your area and research that dairy independently. If it's a small local dairy with good practices, great. If it's just Arla or Müller milk in a glass bottle, you're not getting anything better than supermarket-owned brand, except the nostalgia packaging. The key is not to assume that doorstep delivery automatically means better quality. It can be better, but only if you choose carefully. One quick note about Yeo Valley, because some of you have asked. Yeo Valley is a brand that a lot of people trust, and their yogurt is genuinely good. It's still made at their organic farm in Somerset, and it's worth buying. But here's what you need to know. Since 2018, Yeo Valley's milk, butter, and cheese have been produced by Arla under license. The branding stayed the same, but the supply chain changed completely. So if you're buying Yeo Valley milk, you're actually getting Arla milk with a Yeo Valley label. Their yogurt is still the real deal from their own farm, but the milk isn't what it used to be. Just something to keep in mind. So there you have it. 9 milk brands to avoid, and 5 actually worth buying. And if you made it this far, you now know more about the UK dairy industry than 99% of people shopping in supermarkets. You know which companies dumped thousands of litres of fresh milk rather than fix their broken factories. You know which ones ran secret trials without telling consumers. You know which ones pay farmers below cost and which ones actually treat them fairly. And most importantly, you know that real milk still exists if you're willing to look for it. Now here's what I need you to do. Hit that like button one more time if you haven't already. And especially, hit that hype button, because every single hype this video gets pushes it to more people who need to see this. These companies rely on you not knowing what's really going on. They rely on confusion and complacency. But when thousands of people watch videos like this and start asking questions and switching brands, that's when things change. That's when they realize they can't hide anymore. So, hype it. Share it. Leave a comment right now telling me which food or product you want me to investigate next, because I'm going to keep making videos like this, and I need to know what matters to you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because there's a lot more to uncover, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, stay sharp, stay informed, and protect your plate.